Hey everyone, it's October 21st, which means we are 21 movies in for my October's horror movie marathon fest. Today I watched Herschell Gordon Lewis, The Godfather of Gore. This is a 2010 documentary directed by Frank Henenlotter and Jimmy Maslin. Excuse me, as I understand it, there were some problems just getting things done, making everything work. So Frank Henenlotter stepped in and kind of finished things off, I believe, and made it a viable documentary. Excuse me. So, of course, Herschell Gordon Lewis is the Godfather of Gore. And this is a nice little history of his career. He started off basically making the nudie cuties, as they called them. Just sort of exploitation, nudie movies. And then he just hit on the idea of making a horror movie. And thus Blood Feast was born. Not a very good movie by any means, but it's often considered the first gore film. I don't know if it's considered a slasher film, but a lot of people consider it the first really gory horror movie, with terrible acting and bad special effects, makeup effects, but fun. It can be a lot of fun to see what they did back then. And then, of course, he went on to make 2000 Maniacs and The Wizard of Gore and the Gore Girls and tons of other stuff. A lot of other things. Paint It Blood Red, is that the name of the one? That a lot of people in the documentary seem to think was his best work. That was an interesting one about an artist who couldn't find the right color red for his painting, so he started using human blood. So this is, I like this a lot. If you're a fan of horror movies and you want to sort of see where a lot of it came from, sort of the progenitor of the modern horror flick, gore flick, this is really interesting. And aside from the interviews with a lot of people that worked with Herschell, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera, the actors, you've got Joe Bob Briggs, John Waters, and the thing that surprised me, I had no idea that Mr. Lewis worked with Bunny Yeager. For those of you who aren't familiar with her, she was a pretty famous photographer, probably best known for her work with Betty Page. She did Playboy shoots, and she apparently found actresses for Mr. Lewis, wrote for him, did all sorts of stuff, and she's interviewed in this, talks about her experiences. Excuse me. Two of the other things that I found really fascinating were that Henny Youngman, legendary comedian Henny Youngman, is in the movie The Gore Girls. If I'm not mistaken, that's the one he's in. And the Colonel Sanders, not one of these new pretenders, but the actual Colonel Sanders, was in a Herschell Gordon Lewis movie. He did product placement. They basically said they would, in exchange for food to feed the cast and crew, they would put Kentucky Fried Chicken in the movie. And not just Kentucky Fried Chicken. They would just, wherever they went to film something, they would find a restaurant that would feed them in exchange for product placement. But I guess Colonel Sanders showed up on set, essentially, and they put him in the movie. Just fascinating. They don't go, this isn't a behind the scenes kind of thing, so they don't go into, how they made the gore effects. They do talk a little bit about some of the some of the camera work and a few little anecdotes from making the movies. But this is more obviously about Herschell Gordon Lewis and where he started, how he got to become the Godfather of Gore. Again, for any horror cinephile, this is a great, really fun, interesting film to watch. If you see there, mine is signed by Frank Henenlotter. I actually got to meet Herschell Gordon Lewis at Cinema Wasteland. Really, really nice guy when I met him. I got an autographed copy of the novelization of 2000 Maniacs. And I think that was before this came out. So when this was out, I went to Cinema Wasteland and Frank Henenlotter was there. So I picked this up and had him sign this. Would have been nice to get Herschell Gordon Lewis's signature on this too, but he wasn't around at the time that I was purchasing this. He's still around. Just wasn't around where I was, is what I'm saying. Anyway, so there you have it. Herschell Gordon Lewis, The Godfather of Gore. A documentary. So some people might say it's not really a horror film, but it's about horror films. So, as I said in the very first video in this long series, I'm stretching the boundaries of how we're going to define horror for what I watched during October. This is probably the one that stretches it the most, since it is just a documentary about someone who made horror films. I was wondering if they were going to address any of the remakes, and they do not. I believe I don't even know if it's an official sequel or an unofficial sequel, or it's just in my head, but I believe there's a sequel to Blood Feast. There is a remake of 2000 Maniacs called 2001 Maniacs that I will probably watch before the end of this month. I've seen it before. I enjoy it. There was a remake of The Wizard of Gore, which I enjoyed. Of course, Crispin Glover, always entertaining. And it's filled with suicide girls, which is plenty entertaining as well. But no talk about that. Nothing about any of the remakes. It's basically the story ends with the last of the films that Herschell Gordon Lewis made. But anyway, so that's it. I give this 8.5 out of 10 severed tongues. It's the second time I've used tongues this month in my ratings. But, of course, anyone who's seen a certain Herschell Gordon Lewis movie knows why I chose that. So, 8.5 out of 10 severed tongues for the documentary Herschell Gordon Lewis, The Godfather of Gore. If I can find a trailer for it, I will put it up there somewhere. That's it for day 21. Not many more days to go. I wonder what I'm going to watch next. That's it. I'll see you next time.